I said it before and I'll say it again.
That scene, that last scene.
What does it mean?
I'm the dude, you know?
Get the fuck out of here.
No, I cannot.
That final scene
Starts now.
Cool. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the That Final Scene podcast. My name is Sophie, and as always, I'm joined by Ben and Simon.
Hello.
So today we have a special episode for you guys. I know many of you have been asking for our review on Jordan Peele's Nope, so we're about to deliver the goods because, oh boy, all of us have thoughts on that film. But because we actually got to see the film together, we didn't want to have the conversation on our own. We wanted to have someone to sense check our reactions here, which is why we will be joined by a dear friend of the podcast, my online bestie, Tim, also known as Comedian of Cinema on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, who also runs his own podcast, How's It Going to End? So do make sure to check him out. We will also be talking about films that were ruined by their endings. What is one movie ending you could rewrite and how? So I'm really excited to talk about some of your responses as well. And also, have to say, see how my community's responses differ to Tim's followers. So this is going to be really, really fun. Anything else we want to add before we jump into a conversation with Tim?
Major spoilers for Nope, but yeah,
yes.
I think that's about it.
Yes, we're terrible at warnings with this one. Great. The only other thing we want to give you a heads up is that we will be taking a short break as I'm off to Crete for a couple of weeks to spend some time with the family. And that said, we'll be back in about a month or so. I want to say mid-September.
Mid-September time, yeah.
With an iconic final scene double bill, Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. I feel like I've told you guys. If I haven't, then you have to. You have more than a month to watch. Yeah, it's the 40th anniversary of Blade Runner, and you know I love a good anniversary. So, as always, if you find yourself enjoying this episode, please share it with a friend, ideally someone who knows who Jordan Peele is. And now, without further ado, let's dive right in.
What's this?
It's a movie.
No!
Oh, I liked it.
No!
Can I say something?
No!
I don't get it.
What don't you get about it?
So yeah, thank you so much for having us and for joining us. It's funny because
Thank you for having me and joining me, yeah.
So is this like a mutual thing?
That's the thing.
We all in each other's podcasts then?
Yes, we're both host and guest at the same time.
Right. This is very Inception.
It's very Inception. It's very meta.
I get to make mine sound infinitely smarter by not having just my American, fucking this and shit that and.
And our sound, it gets to sound much more cooler, I feel like.
I think you're being too kind saying we sound educated. That's way too kind.
I also get to benefit from the structure you guys use and go, okay, yeah, that's a lot, that's just better quality to be able to divide the episode into parts. And then that way you don't rant for 20 minutes on whatever the fuck.
I don't know. Maybe that's what we get into today.
How many times have I been on your podcast? 2 or 3?
I think 3.
I think it's 3. It's 3 now. Yeah. But for those who haven't listened to these episodes, just so we can do like a quick intros maybe, because I know you. I have been running the Instagram page That Final Scene for over 4 years now, and I'm currently playing around with TikTok and YouTube as well. But the most exciting update over the past year has been this podcast, obviously, which has been an extension of the page. And I'm blessed to be doing it with these two, Ben and Simon. So, yeah, I feel like I'm putting you on the spot. You guys need to introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Ben and that's Simon.
No, but how do you give the origin story? Give the origin story.
Oh, okay. You go for that, Simon. You're the one who ties us all together.
Oh, well, Timothy. Sophie and I used to work together when she moved to London from Greece in 2016?
16, 2 weeks before Brexit.
And yeah.
Good times.
That was what swayed the vote, actually. And we started working together at a very questionable startup called Emoticast. And Sophie was social media director, head of
everything.
Ponchoing. And then the whole startup collapsed because there was some embezzling and all sorts of other shenanigans going on. And we stayed friends ever since. And I think then Sophie started the Instagram account, That Final Scene. And then we kind of went our separate ways a bit. And like I'd noticed that she was doing really well with it, and I'd been thinking, oh, it'd be great to do a podcast. And what a perfect way to do it through that type of approach. And then Ben and I were in the pub about 6 months ago or whatever, and I was telling him about this podcast or something, or you telling me about listening to a podcast, and it turned out it was Sophie's podcast.
Well,
it was Sophie's Instagram page.
Yeah, I had said, I was like, I really want to get into podcasting, and I'm thinking of some ideas, and I was like, I actually followed this Instagram page called That Final Scene, and I really think there's a great idea in there. And Simon just goes, oh, Sophie's podcast. I was like,
I mean, Instagram page.
Yeah, or sorry, Sophie's Instagram page. I was like, who's Sophie? At that point, I didn't know who Sophie was. And yeah, and then we had like a conversation, some beers, and then about 2 months later we said, okay, let's sit down and actually get in front of these microphones and start recording.
I mean, that's fucking awesome to have that like perfect trio kind of meet over just the Instagram page.
It's a cute story, and I also feel like we have different perspectives in a way, and I think this is what makes a podcast work, because we all come from very different backgrounds and we all have very different movie tastes and, you know, TV tastes as well, which, I mean, I feel like people can tell by now. But why don't you give an intro to our listeners? Like, who are you? How would you define, you know, your podcast and like your page? Obviously 100K followers. What's the journey so far?
I started my page, oh God, I think 2017. Took a while until now. I started 2017, and it was very much not the kind of, I was a part of something else, like another Instagram page, you know. It was very much like I would put something up and be proud of it, and then like it would get bogged down by a bunch of other things. And I was like, you know what, no, I can just maybe, you know, I think I was in my second semester of college, and I was like, I can, you know, do college work and also post on Instagram every now and then. And then I did, and after a while I started like just garnering a following, and I was all right, well, start focusing on your stuff maybe on something you're more interested in. I had started majoring in film studies and then screenwriting and as a focus, and it just got more, you know, more. I think that's how it grew easier, was posting more about my interest rather than what I thought, you know, would be popular to post on Instagram. And then the podcast was more of like, I had started my YouTube page in 2020 in January. And I did like 3 reviews. I reviewed 1917, The Witcher, and Birds of Prey. I had this weird, like, you know, studio apartment where I was just making these videos against the like a green paneled wall. It was like really not. I had one of those lapel mics. I put on a wooden spoon right out of frame of the camera, and it was just, you know, it was all right. And then the pandemic hit, and I didn't get to see any movies that year. And I had planned out like on a calendar a year of reviews I wanted to post and all that. So then of just a year of no creativity of at all stemmed into January of 2021. I was like, if you get the right equipment, if you get a good mic and a good recorder, then you can just start that. And then last year, I think March or so, I started the actual podcast, and a lot of it was just me talking at first. And that's because most of my friends in college left New York after the pandemic. So it was a lot of like, all right, well, you can kind of, you're very good at like, when I'm alone and I'm with nobody, I will just start talking about an idea. So you can do that in front of a mic and at least turn it into something that people can watch and listen to if they're interested, which I had like no basis of that at all. And then I started, you know, the good thing about having a page with any amount of followers is because followers is currency now. So I could get to tell someone who, you know, like a stunt performer, or people who don't necessarily have like people coming up to them and be like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And then I was, oh, that's great. I can talk to, you know, I spoke to the first person, Samantha Wynn, who was a stunt performer in a bunch of Zack Snyder movies. And that just started. I was like, oh, I can actually reach out to people and talk to them about projects they've been in, what they're working on now. And then I started talking. I think you were the first, or one of the first people like that I didn't know who you were. Like, we followed each other for a while. And then I was like, I like the stuff she's posting. It's really interesting. I love the idea of analyzing a final scene and a final moment. So it became a lot simpler to just, you know, reach out.
Cool. I think it's time to jump to our community segment section, if that's okay with you, Tim.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Let's do it. Okay. So as a recap, both me and Tim asked our communities on Instagram to share the film endings they would rewrite, and also tell us what the new endings would look like. So we got some amazing responses, right? Tim, do you want to start?
So since I've never done that before, the dual post, so I was getting a lot of notifications of responding to people, and you'd be like, I love that. And then I'd check their comment. I'd be like, it's fucking awful. Why would you do a Heat 2 where De Niro still lives, and then it's just the same as the first movie again. There were some that I was like, that's an interesting take I never thought of. I'm also a real...
The Titanic one, yeah, well, we can talk about it, but yeah, I have thoughts.
Well, okay, well, one that I got that I liked, because I really combed through these comments. A lot of these people just wanted to like rewrite the movie of their dreams. And it's like, just completely getting rid of maybe the intention of the movie in the end or something like that, and it felt very much like a fairy tale type thing.
We had a few people talk about La La Land, right, in the end, which is obviously very sad. And you're right, we had a few people saying it's not that it's a bad ending, it's probably the more appropriate, the more realistic one. But, you know, if in a dream world, I would love for them to have ended up together. So I get that, but you're right. It wouldn't have the same effect. So I get why you would want to rewrite something for the sake of just like, I don't know, it kind of validates you and like your story in your head. But it was they acknowledged that it was the right ending, or a more appropriate one in a way.
This question, I think it's a really interesting question that you can approach. I don't think that it should be like asking this question, posing this question. You can't go talk about like the greatest movies of all time. It should just be off the table. Talk about maybe a movie that you liked, that you saw that no one else saw, or maybe a movie that was underrated or overrated, and attack it. But like, I don't know, like one that I really liked that I actually wrote down. I screenshotted the comment. I don't know how to say this user, Leah.DJEZRI. Something like that.
Yeah.
Talked about Disney's Encanto, which I think is a really good one. She wrote, I really don't understand why they got their magical powers back, since the whole movie seemed to point how magic is useless when you're all together. I would just erase the part where the magic is back so that they would all be equal again, and it would also end their reign over the rest of the village. Fantastic idea. My favorite thing about that moment in Encanto is when it's like, oh, so now there's no like caste system within the family based on powers now. And even the magical house, like the idea that like you make the house magical, the house doesn't have to be magical. I think that's a great rewriting.
We love this thing.
I think the one that, looking at them, well, I mean, the one that stood out to me the most was someone made a comment about Batman versus Superman, which my big problem is not, you know, someone wanting to rewrite the ending. It's the fact that you still have to sit through another 2 hours and 20 minutes of absolute horse shit of a film to then rewrite the ending that still doesn't make sense. Because the other thing that I saw was loads of people being like, Man of Steel, the ending of Man of Steel really annoyed me, because at the ending of Man of Steel, he kills General Zod, which is totally out of character. No offense to the person who made the Batman vs Superman comment, but then him killing Batman would make it an even worse ending, because Superman just doesn't do that. Superman doesn't kill people. So not only do I have to sit through the whole film and it just be awful, like terrible.
Yeah, so Man of Steel, I fully agree. I love the film, the ending, not convinced still. Batman versus Superman.
Batman versus, no. Batman versus Superman is terrible. You won't convince me otherwise.
I don't hate it.
I hate it. I that and Justice League.
Justice League is like another level. Like it's just. It's
a film where the like thing that makes them stop hating one another is that their moms have the same name. Mm-hmm. What the fuck are you talking about? How stupid is that? Martha! Oh my god. Like, it's a piss take. It genuinely feels like it was written by, at the end of it feels like it was written by a 5-year-old. And it was a bad ending to a terrible film. Don't rewrite it. Just burn it. Don't watch it. Hard retweet.
Which brings me to another comment that, speaking of superhero films, Thor, someone said, Thor, Love and Thunder makes no sense. That final scene is set up to save Jane. Baffling. And I respond to that comment, just being like, the whole film needs to be rewritten. Like, the whole film, like, not just the ending. We haven't talked about Thor 4 properly, which is fine, because I don't want to spend too much, I don't want to give that film any airtime. But yeah, just like cancel it, burn to the ground altogether.
What about you, Si? Did you find any good ones?
I actually found it quite hard to think of these, because I think that if you want to rewrite the final scene, you probably didn't like the film that much in the first place. Therefore, well, that's what I was thinking. So I was like, well, I probably didn't.
Or the
care
ending. You know, like there is a. I mean, I hear that question quite a lot in a different way, as in, what was one film that was ruined by its ending? Because you see, I mean, I have had that experience quite a few times where I loved the film up until the end. It was like, what the fuck?
Yeah. Well, the film that I thought of, which is a bit of a silly answer really, is the end to the Richard Curtis film, Four Weddings and a Funeral. Oh, okay. Where there's a line so laden with cheese, it almost destroys the entire film. And it's where Hugh Grant's character Charles, I think he's called in it. The love interest comes to the front door of the house that he's at, and it's pouring with rain outside, and Hugh goes out to talk to her, and it's like Hollywood rain. It's like ridiculous amounts of water coming down, and she does this line where she's like, "Is it raining? I hadn't noticed," and it's like, "Oh my god, it's terrible." So yeah, I guess that's like an example of a line that takes you out of a film straight away. Yeah. Even though the level of cheese in those Richard Curtis films is high, that was like Gouda or something. I don't know, Stilton. Yeah. It was like another level. So yeah, that's my answer. But I think I found it hard to think of one because films where I hate... Because for me, like, as much as you can debate endings of films and stuff, for me, the film is a piece of art that the director and the writer and all the people made it intended. So they're not meant to be tinkered with. You've got to take them as they are.
I'm not sure.
And if I hated the ending, I probably would not be a fan of the film. So therefore, I wouldn't remember it and be that interested.
Okay, but what about films that have... I mean, if you look back at certain films, like Gone with the Wind, which is it's an incredibly racist film. If you remove the racist elements, it's still a great film. So you can make a modern version
film,
of it.
Wouldn't it? It would be different.
But still effective,
it's
as
like,
in doesn't take away from that.
Maybe. It'd just be a different piece of art then. For example, I love the film Into the Wild, and I found the ending incredibly sad. So I would maybe go, I'll rewrite it so the guy doesn't die in the caravan. And he gets to go home and reconcile with his parents. But then that'd be a different...
Yeah, which is why it's a hypothetical question. Like, if you could rewrite something and kind of make it your own.
To rectify it.
Yeah, not in a way to rectify it, like reimagine it. Like, and there are so many, like in the concept of remake, sometimes they do change the ending, right? Remakes, and there have been some doesn't happen very often.
Because even if I know I'm watching a film where the ending's been focus grouped to death, and you know it's been sort of researched, and they're just going for maximum box office hit. I don't care. I just judge the film as I find it.
Sure.
And yeah.
That's valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually agree a lot more in the line that it does become its own. It becomes a new thing. It's like, it's like a movie I saw recently. Well, not recently, a couple months ago. It was a Duel. You heard about that with
Wait, the Steven Spielberg film?
No. That's
that's Duel.
Riley Stearns, who did I hate this air bubble shit. He did The Art of Self-Defense with Jesse Eisenberg. He did this one with who plays the sister in Guardians of the Galaxy, a sister of Zoe Saldana. Forgot her name.
Oh, Karen Gillan.
Karen Gillan. Yeah, she plays. She in this world, there's a concept where you can clone yourself if you know you're gonna die. If you have terminal cancer or something, you can make a clone. You can leave with your family and your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your partner or whatever. And it's very, very treated normally, which is a lot of the humor comes from that. But it's very much like that. It's not her. It's a new person that looks like her, which is really interesting, which I think that happens when you change the ending of something, you have to rewrite the DNA of it. Like say you change the ending of, I'm going to use my least favorite example again, and to change the ending of Heat, you have to change the characters of Macaulay and Pacino's character, because their whole point of their characters is that it's all they do is rob banks and catch people who rob banks. That's who they are. There's nothing more to them because they're at the end of their lines. I'm reading Heat 2, which Michael Mann recently released, and it follows Val Kilmer's character because he's still alive at the end of Heat, but at the same time it touches back on 1980s De Niro and Val Kilmer and all that, which is I think is a great idea if you want to do a sequel without ruining the culmination of Pacino or De Niro not going back to jail, which that's his one thing is he's not going to go back and he'll never bend in that way, which is a great character defining moment. So If you keep it going on, it just seems like you're delaying the inevitable. So when it comes to changing an ending like that, I do like the idea of changing a final moment or a final scene, because I think when people hear changing the ending, they think like rewriting the third act. Maybe this is probably one that you guys have heard. In the end of Scorsese's The Departed, the fucking rat goes along the railing. Get rid of it.
Yeah.
We get it, Scorsese. You lose all sense of like the impactful moment of silent Wahlberg in the apartment, and that's it. And then it's like, we get it. The rat's there. That's what I would completely take out.
That's smart, actually, because we're talking about 3 billboards earlier, Ben, when like we find that some films may potentially end a scene too early or a scene too late. So is that kind of like tweak that you could make in a way to just make the impact a lot more, effective?
I think the Departed was one of the comments on the post as well. Someone mentioned that. Yeah, it's a good spot.
Ben, what about you? What kind of film would you?
Well, again, as I said, I think, and it's interesting. It goes, it would have been Man of Steel but then that goes back to rewriting all of it. But actually, in that scenario, that's probably a good thing, because the end of Man of Steel completely misunderstands what Superman's supposed to be about. And like The Dark Knight does it really well. In the Joker's whole thing is, I want to get you to cross your one line, and Batman's like, I'll never do that, and he has to find a way to not do that.
What's Batman's line?
To kill someone.
Oh.
And that's Superman's line as well. But it gets to the end of it, and he kills General Zod, Michael Shannon's character. He just killed him, which wouldn't happen in the comic books. And it's that the reason I don't like that, and the reason I would change that, is because doing that completely misinterprets what Superman's about.
But I'd like to take what you just said and then apply it to your favourite movie franchise of all time, James Bond, and ask you about the final scene of the most recent James Bond, where they break the rule that James Bond never dies.
Perfect. Had to be done. Because they needed to change it. Yeah, Bond needs to be shaken up, and I like the fact that they did that.
He's dead. He's not shaken up, he's dead.
Yeah,
and I think Ben was referring to the moral line that is it's not like
but there's a moral
Bond doesn't
line
have a
in
moral
Superman
line
and
in not
Batman.
dying.
Well,
there isn't a moral line in not dying.
I think there is a difference between a thematic line and a moral line, which I think it's a great conversation, because there's the idea of you have a character that at this point, Batman, Superman, James Bond, they're more than characters. They are manifestations of decades of stories and feelings and interpretations. So I think that's really interesting I also love No Time to Die. I think No Time to Die somehow is one of the only movies that benefited from 3 years of delays. When it finally came out, a lot of people, because I think a lot of movies that came out after the delays, people were like, okay, finally we got that over with. You know what I mean? But this was one of those ones where it was like, it had the added pressure of being the final Craig Bond film. And it had that level of, okay, well, this was set to release, like I think April of 2020.
I reckon each time it delayed, they were like focus grouping the end of the film. And every time they were flip-flopping between he lives, he dies, he lives, he dies. And then the final time it's like he dies.
Probably a real possibility. I think that it's been enough time that they probably either maybe not reshot like a possible, in the can somewhere in a safe house somewhere. But I think it's very possible that there was a sense of like, maybe this is a good time for us to completely change it. That happened with the Batman. It wasn't completely changed, but it gave Reeves a good 6 months to kind of dive more into. They only filmed a third of it by the time the pandemic hit, and 8 months, 9 months later, they were able to get back into it. So, yeah, I think a lot of movies were cursed and benefited from that pause. And
has there ever been an example of a film where an alternative ending is leaked?
Oh, many times.
The public have found the footage.
Yeah. I Am Legend,
They do that.
Get Out. I mean,
I Am Legend,
it's
on the DVD. It's the completely different ending where he doesn't die is just in the DVD because they shot
I Am
both.
Legend is, it's much better.
It's also very much like the theatrical release got poisoned by it's 2009, and in 2009 action movies end with the hero sacrifices himself or something.
Yeah.
And it's very much it's also, that's another thing. A lot of these fucking big popular movies lack, it's like they don't want to include any sense of subtlety or nuance in case it's very much an underestimation of what the audience will understand. So if there's a scene in the alternate ending of I Am Legend, he notices a butterfly tattoo on the one he'd been keeping, the daybreak, whatever they called him, he'd been keeping, and it's a, you know, it's a, to him it's a sign from his daughter in heaven that these are still people, and you don't, you know, this is not the case where it's like, if I go down, I'm taking you with me. He keeps a grenade in his scientific desk, you know what I mean, like full of syringes and shit. So it's like, it's much more like, I think the focus group was like, I like the fucking explosion over him reconciling the idea that like these are still humans in there underneath them, and it's very much, you know, that case.
Okay, so mine, very quickly, it's a funny one, but just to end on a funny note, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, hear me out. The final scene is so dumb. Like, I would have had both of them die, because in the final scene, they're completely surrounded by a bunch of gunmen with assault rifles and full body armor, and realistically, they would have not made it out alive. Now, you may say, films do not have to be realistic, yada yada, and I get it, but I would have loved like a Thelma and Louise or like a Bonnie and Clyde kind of ending where they just, you know, just ended on a
Blaze of glory.
Yeah. Because they already look like they came out of Photoshop, right? So you might as well have tried a bit harder to make them look more realistic and like human. So yeah, that's the one I would rewrite. Awesome. So should we dive into Nope?
Yes.
Okay, it's time.
Oh, look, a message from our sponsor.
G.I. Jane 2. Can't wait to see it.
Nah, yo, hold my poodle. Hey, yo, what's up? Y'all got a problem? Y'all want some of this? Without much further ado. Here we go again.
So following the death of their father, right? We how did he die? A falling coin or something?
Yeah, coin falls from space and
From the
goes
sky.
straight to his
Yeah.
eye.
OJ, played by Daniel Kaluuya, and Kiki Palmer, they start to suspect that it might have been the result of a UFO. I think that's my understanding anyway. In the sky above the ranch, they decide to try and land the opera show. It's kind of the proof that the UFO actually exists. So they can sell to make, I don't know, the rich and famous lifestyle a reality. I think the premise is fairly straightforward for a Jordan Peele film. But yeah, it's interesting because I don't know, where do I start? Like, I have so many thoughts about this film because I know, Tim, you and I were talking about it, where it's there are a lot of things that I liked. There were quite a few things that we liked, and then there were a couple of things that we didn't. I can talk about myself. I love the ending, so we can get to that in a second. The biggest thing that I struggled with was how underexplored the Steven Yeun's character like storyline really was. Like the most exciting, like one of the most exciting scene was what happened in '89. That, you know, chimpanzee attack. It was one of the best scenes. Yeah, and then you had, you had the actual resolution of that storyline felt like the payoff wasn't quite there for me, so I kind of struggled with that. And one of the things that I told Ben and Simon, because we actually got to watch it together, is that I came out of the film feeling like there wasn't like a linear structure to the story. Sometimes I felt like I was missing scenes because things were kind of like jumping here and there. The first couple of scenes were a bit awkward for me, you know, like that scene like with a green screen. I was kind of struggling.
Dragged a bit, didn't it? We looked at each other and we were like, this is going on a bit too long.
No, I didn't. No, that's the thing. I didn't.
That particular scene.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. For me, it was a bit awkward, that scene. As in, like, I feel like they struggled to find the tone in the first few scenes, and then they found their groove. And obviously, like, Kiki Palmer is incredible, like the standout of the film by far. And when you think about the film, like, it's both sci-fi and horror, and I feel like it does a lot better in the sci-fi element than the horror element, in a sense, because
kind of switches halfway through.
It does, which makes it feel a bit uneven tonally in a way. So yeah, that was my initial reaction. I feel like when you think of a film and you try to critique it in a way, you think about it from a storytelling standpoint and then from a filmmaking standpoint. And like the filmmaking aspect of it is incredible. We didn't get to watch it on IMAX, unfortunately.
Incredible's a bit strong.
No, it's not like, no, it was so well done. Like I love the camera work, I love the cinematography, the sound design was amazing. Our screen was shit.
There was,
like I feel
there
like
was
our
a
experience
stain
was so
on the
like
screen.
Yeah,
And
the big bit of dirt on the
when
screen.
what I describe as the flying mushroom, which is the UFO design that they went for, it looked a bit like the underside of a mushroom or a stingray fish.
I thought it looked like a cowboy hat. That's why I really liked it.
Yeah, it's true. And then, but earlier on in the film, it's exciting because you get to see glimpses of it.
Yeah.
Which is the bit, obviously,
Yeah.
once it gets revealed, it becomes old quite quickly. But because of the stain on our screen, I kept thinking there were like glimpses of it in the clouds, but it was like stationary. But then I realised it was just like a smear on our.
It was so
cinema screen.
distracting.
Yeah.
It was so distracting.
Because this thing hides in a cloud, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I thought it was like a really bad CGI kind of cloud or something.
But to quickly go back to the filmmaking aspect, what we need to like one of the things we need to remember is that one of the probably like most difficult jobs of the director is to direct people. And what he achieved with Kiki Palmer and Kaluuya and even what's his name? Sorry, the third, the
Angel, yeah, I
the
can't
tech
remember the actor's
salesman.
name. His
Yeah,
name's Angel, yeah.
Angel, yeah. He was really good. Yeah, it takes a lot of skill to direct actors. I think we underestimate that because you've seen both. Like I've personally seen like both of them in other films before, and they bring something entirely new to the character, like to their characters. I think people assume that Kiki Palmer is like that in real life. She's not. Like that's her. She just like she really brings M to life. And I do think it's down to Jordan Peele, just like trying to use the traditional archetypes of, you know, moody and overly bubbly, but making it not feel stereotypical. Like it feels very, very fresh. I know you remember that scene where they fist bump. Like what did they? You laughed so hard in that
It's
scene.
where like they have a little victory, and then the brother and sister do like a really funny high five sequence
Yeah.
or something.
They do the practiced handshake or something.
Where
Yeah.
I think she was like,
It's just
"Oh,
like a nice
motherfucker, about
siblings-
the camera." It's like,
Yeah.
It's like a nice sibling moment.
Yeah.
That's quite cool.
Yeah.
I think at the further I've gotten away from it, because obviously we saw it like 5 days ago, the more I've thought about it, I do think I really enjoyed it, and I agree with what you said, Sophie. I think like technically I think it's fantastic and the performances in are great. I do think it just really suffers from as soon as you see the alien and then it starts getting bigger and it turns into this big billowing flowing linen shirt.
It's like a napkin.
Yeah, I think it loses quite a lot there. I think it's almost like they've gone, oh, we've got all this money to spend on this big alien, when actually it was more terrifying and more interesting when you didn't really see it as much. I mean, it's the whole Jaws thing, isn't it? Like it's scarier when you don't see it, you know, you don't know what it is. And as soon as it comes out of the water, you're like, that thing looks fucking stupid. Like it's clearly a big mechanical shark. I
guess they betted on it becoming a character in the film.
And I
then
like
it
the
didn't
fact
really-
that, you know, obviously this is a spoilery thing, but it's spoilers, yeah, from here on. It's, you know, the idea that it's not a group of aliens and that it's actually this thing is like some kind of creature. It's not a spaceship. This thing is alive. I think that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just lost me a little bit as soon as it started getting bigger and all that kind of stuff. I actually thought it was threatening enough and scary enough when it did just kind of look like the flying top hat from Monopoly. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. I agree with what you were saying at the start, Sophie, about the beginning and finding its feet, because the monkey attack scene feels like a different film.
Yeah.
It's really gritty
Yeah.
and genuinely scary and quite real.
It's intense, yeah.
And then the rest of the film is kind of sci-fi, hyper, crazy, fake reality kind of vibe.
And the opening scene sets the tone, right? Like it's interesting because usually the opening scene serves the purpose of maybe linked back to the end, or there is something, but I think it's just there for shock value, to just lure you in. It's like, okay, we're like, this is Jordan Peele, like it's happening, and then obviously you have the you get the whole scene in somewhere in the middle, I would say, where we get
I think it's because obviously the film is broken into the sections of the different horses.
Yes.
And then one of the 6 sections is Gordy. I think it's like the 3rd or 4th, maybe.
Yeah. And I just love that storyline. So, like, I would have seen an entire film with that kind of storyline and Stephen Yeun's character and like the trauma that he suffered in the back of. That was so interesting. So,
but there are some other just great, like, I think my favorite scene in it, and it was the best reaction in the cinema, is when I think it's the 2nd horse, when he goes into the shed and all the lights are on, turns them off, and then you see the alien sitting on the floor, and the woman beside me in the cinema went, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
And it was a great reaction, and it was perfect. And I was like, that's Jordan Peele. That's fucking brilliant. And that scene was so good, especially and when he punched it and it's the kids. It was great. But yeah,
it's when the head bobs out from the side.
Yeah.
That's
oh
the
my
funny
god!
one.
And just that relief.
And the weird sound design. It was this like blah, 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 some kind of weird noises.
Yeah.
There's nothing more unsettling than like pure inhumanity. I think when I think of like the shit that scares me to my core is that idea of like we can't perceive how, like, I love the idea, first off, that it's not a ship full of aliens. I think that's such a great little twist to be like, it's its own animal that's hunting, and that's why it moves as erratically as it does, which is another aspect to like the fear of it. Like when we think of something taking off or flying, we imagine it very singular, and the fact that it moves as it does. But that idea, when that scene where he's in the horse area and they just plop out to the side, it's like, it's so purely inhuman in that moment. Or that when it cuts back and it's small and you can't see it in the light at first, and then it just stands up.
Yeah.
And then that shot where it takes like 50 seconds until it fully starts popping its head out.
Oh yeah, he's trying to video it around the corner. Yeah, and it's just putting its head around.
To let it just take its time before you even see like the sliver of it peeking out, and then it starts revealing itself. And I think that it does those quick scares great. What I love about the opening is that we have no context on the Gordy moment. All we see is the aftermath of him tearing shit up. And what's so great about that is the first thing I went to is like, oh, they brought in a monkey and it just went ape shit, literally, and killed everybody. And then you get the context and you see, and then that's followed by the death of OJ's father, and then him on set of that which is a commercial too, and they're bringing on like the preppy like white actress who's like the makeup lady is behind her being like, they told me to be here. It's like, oh, so that's the priority over the animal, and he's being talked over, and you get the idea that like following a scene like the aftermath of Gordy with the before the horse kick, it felt very similar to me. We're seeing before the altercation. If we had shown up after, and maybe we would have gotten the feeling that like OJ wasn't as professional or something like that. If we missed him giving everybody, like, trying to do the opening and trying to get like, hey guys, don't do this, don't do that. And I think that following that felt the idea of like you get OJ's passion for what his dad did, which is, I think what's funny is like a lot of, I don't want to use the word predictable, because the characterization of OJ and Emerald aren't necessarily predictable. There is like, the bubbly and the one who's very, a centrist, very inward, but you get a lot of their hopes and dreams very fast, very early on, and that scene where they're drunk and they're sharing with each other, you get so much of what OJ considers special and what Emerald considers special because of their upbringing. I love that like 10-second flashback to young OJ and Emerald kind of just doing that with each other, because you get the feeling of like, now we know why OJ considers this so important, and we know why Emerald doesn't, because she wasn't prioritized by her dad and he was. And you get the feeling like, I love that scene where he's got so much he wants to do. It's pure ambition. When he's alone and he's drunk and he's doing the HDRI, he's making that mirror ball for CG and all that stuff. Like, he clearly wants to do more, which I think is a really interesting note to add for a character like him. You could have made him just like, because he is, the strong, silent type. He sticks to what he considers his obligations and his responsibilities. But then there is that level, like he also has that, he's still Emerald's brother. He wants to do his own thing, but he feels maybe too attached to something his father did, and he considers it special. And you get that moment of, that Emerald only got the script of the safety thing from watching her dad, because she says her dad's great. She doesn't add on a great for herself, which is really, I think, something that it shows what her priorities versus OJ's, and the fact by the end of that, he's the only one that's like, I don't know. They both want to take it down, but hers is much more like, listen, if we can get out of here and come out of it fine, and that's also an option. I think that comes from her growing up.
Okay. Usually at this point we say spoiler alert, but I feel like we spoiled the film a bunch already, so same on us. Are we ready? Okay, so I know people have seen the film fairly recently, so we don't need to go into the plot in too much detail, but as a reminder, we have a recap of what went down in the film. That's what Simon calls the Sophie summary. So much of it is concerned with OJ's and M's attempts to capture evidence of the strange UFO that has taken up residence somewhere in the sky above their ranch. During their mission, they enlist the help of Angel, a tech salesman who takes interest in whatever's been happening, and eventually of Antler's Holst, a cinematographer who is supposedly able to capture basically anything he wants on film, and IMAX characters, because that's a flex. There's that certain side storyline that I mentioned with Stephen Young's character Jupe, I want to say that's his name, which I don't want to go into too much detail right now, but what happens prompts OJ to realize that the UFO is not actually a spaceship but a predator that will devour anything that looks directly at it. This helps him to come up with a plan that will allow them to get their footage by using the similar tactics to those he has used over the years, training horses. We actually do see that the creature, which has now been nicknamed Jean Jacket, we haven't mentioned that yet, is successfully captured on camera by Holst and Angel, but for whatever reason, the cinematographer wants a better shot of it, so he gets closer and, of course, gets eaten alive along with his camera, essentially putting the mission right back to square one. At this point, Jean Jacket is seen to visibly change into a far more elaborate form and continues pursuing OJ and M. And M kind of thinks quickly and turns to the theme park, right? To release a large helium, what is it? The mascot. Is it a mascot? Or how would you call it?
Mascot,
to kind of bait the creature. The plan works, and Jean Jacket attempts to eat the balloon, kind of, I guess, or whatever you want to call it. But when it tries to do so, it explodes and seems to be killed. I think that's the interpretation. It dies. Thankfully, they also get their footage and manages to get the elusive shot of the creature just in time, using an analog camera to grab a picture of it just before it dies. But before the film ends, M sees her brother on horseback, realizing that he survived. And this is clearly, we were talking about this earlier, Ben, an homage to the old Hollywood Westerns, where the usually white hero is depicted heroically on horseback, kind of signaling a happy ending.
Wearing a Scorpion King hoodie, which I really like.
Another flex from that film.
I just love that was one of the references throughout, that he
So
worked on the
good.
Scorpion King.
So good. So this very final shot was one of my favorite things about the film. We were talking about this earlier with Ben. So I was thinking about how Jordan Peele takes this kind of Tarantino-esque, like Inglourious Bastards kind of approach, where he's reimagining history in such a powerful way, with, you know, black people's like stories like front and center. So when you think about it, the ending is about the erasure of, you know, black people from Hollywood's very beginnings, and Westerns is that kind of primal genre in that sense. And it's almost like an act of reclamation for black contributions to Hollywood as an industry. And I like the fact that you always have Jordan Peele saying, I will always make black stories, like that's my thing, and you need to get used to it. So yeah, it's why I love the ending of Django Unchained so much, right? It's such a beautiful cinematic parallel in that sense, when you think of Jamie Foxx and the horseback, and you have Kerry Washington waiting for him. It's like so beautiful. What did you guys make of that very final shot?
I quite enjoyed it. I like the fact that I feel like a lot of movies like that, either you don't see that Daniel Kaluuya is still alive, or he is just
Oh,
dead.
you mentioned that, yeah.
Like it would just be M just staring in the look in her eyes, and then it's kind of like, make up your own mind. Does she take the photo and get rich? Is he there? Kind of thing. But actually just goes, no, he's there. Yeah, he's alive. Of course he's alive. Because he knew what to do, you know? Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. My only thing coming out of it was I was like, please just pick up the photo and take it with you, because you never actually see her take the photo because she's so focused on him. So in my head I'm like, fuck, don't forget the
Imagine.
photograph. This has all been for the
I thought as
photo.
the police were arriving, I was like, what if one of the reporters that were arriving grabs the photo and runs off with it, and then she doesn't get the credit?
Yeah.
Is that what you think? You thought, Tim?
For some reason, I 100% thought that, which I Googled the cinematographer's name because I forgot it, and it's so ridiculous. It's Antlers Hoist. It's very much like, Hoyt van Hoytema is very much also that, like, I can imagine he's been in the industry for 200 years. But no, the idea that I for sure, because also, by the way, I've seen the movie 5 times by now. It's my top 4 I've seen most in theaters. If I see it one more, it'll be top 3. The Western vibe in this movie, the fact that Jordan Peele made a modern Western, he made, it's very much like, think of every Western from the 50s, 60s. It's very much like, if it's the Native Americans, they're the enemy. They're incredibly advanced compared to the white American cowboys. They are, savages, and they have battle tactics, and they sweep in and they empty whole towns. And you walk in and you see arrows, and you're like, they went through here. And it's very much they're an own entity at that point, And he turned it into what I love actually about Antlers Hoist's death is the fact that he does represent that old establishment Hollywood to me. He's very much like that dream you're looking for. It's the one I've had my whole life. The idea that he's been working in the industry for 60 years and he hasn't gotten that perfect shot to him. Like it's a epiphany. It doesn't exist for him. He wants to get that golden hour shot, even if it means killing him. As he's getting sucked up, he's probably like, I got it. And then he's okay with frankly, for the film, it's the most cartoonish thing to me. But what I love about it is that you then you get OJ and Emerald, who come into with this not even just youthful, like a severely generational difference in the idea of how they want to attack this thing. Also, I was for certain that he left the roll of film when I first saw it. I was like, but you don't need the one up from the photo from the well. You have his roll of film. And then after times of watching it, I don't see him take out that roll and switch to his other camera.
Yeah,
he does. Wait, there's 2 cameras.
Yeah, but doesn't Angel keep filming?
Well, that's nothing. Angel keeps going until it gets blown over or whatever, and maybe the film gets exposed to light and that's part of the story and it gets ruined or whatever. But
he's done a couple of reloads by then.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like you have something, especially you have the shot of it turning sideways with OJ, which is such I watched it in IMAX, and dude, for a second I don't think I breathed for like a good while. I was just watching it go by. And not to mention oh god, what was his name? I have it right here. Michael Abels, his score.
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
The fact that it's not only just like eerie noises or generic, like anticipation thriller music. It's got that pioneer like Oregon Trail type music where you feel like there's a discovery happening, and it's got that idea of whenever fucking pilgrims go over a hill and they look at undiscovered America, and they're like, look at all the world we can take, and it's very much that you get that like anticipatory feeling in it, where that entire chase leading to Emerald's Akira slide is so.
That was awesome. Yeah, the Akira slide was great.
It's so I know maybe it's just because I've gotten so into this movie, and I've seen it. I've had the benefit of genuinely seeing it as many times as I've had. It's an uphill. It's like a fucking roller coaster. It's an uphill ride until you get to that drop where it's like, okay, now I know what's going to happen. When Jean Jacket opens up and it becomes this linen sheet in the wind gusts and all that, it felt very desperate. It felt like the creature was like, this is fucking usually so easy, and these assholes won't look at me, so I'm gonna open up. It felt like I keep saying that Jordan Peele probably created a biology for this thing. He probably has some type of sketches or something where it shows it closed, it shows it maybe in specific situation, and then it has its full outside, like, because when the movie opens too, we go through the mouth of it. We hear blowing wind and we hear people screaming. And we see clouds. We're going through the mouth of it, and then it opens up to the jockey on the horse on screen. But before that, it's supposed to be, you know, a film's the projection in a theater, but it's very much the mouth. It's like blue and green, and you're going right out of it. And the fact that it's trying so hard, the fact that it does lose its sense of like hidden wonder, like the Jaws shark, that it represents a more modern version of, you know, people trying to capture thing on cameras, people trying to get the views and the clicks and the likes. And like, you know, I have to bring it up just because it's Kahlua recently responded to Logan Paul being like criticizing the movie, just criticizing exactly what he brings to the movie. Like the fact that, you know, he would have been the fucking TMZ guy pulling up, being like, "Hey bro, so here," and then he picks him up or whatever. But the
TMZ guy getting thrown off the bike was perfect. Oh my God.
And that's where I think that also the fact that we see this giant biological being, the fact that like, you know, it's still consciously moving when it hears OJ or Emerald, it turns back and forth. It doesn't know who to take. And when it whips up the TMZ guy, that's what frightened me more than anything, even more than seeing it early on when it was hidden in the clouds, was seeing a human body whip it, because it's officially dehumanized to me. It's officially like there's no power taken in. It's kind of what makes the boys a little scary to me, when there's no sense of like the lower beings, the beings who aren't flying around and doing amazing things, are fucked in every sense of the word. So seeing at one point Emerald get picked up, and I'm like, fuck, is she gonna just get whipped through the air and go into this thing? And luckily she gets out of current, and Angel he wraps himself in barbed wire, which is such a great, I thought fully he was going to die, but let it consume him wrapped in barbed wire and then let that fuck up its guts. I don't know. I've watched this too many times that I think that I need to take a step back and really analyze parts of it, because I do agree that I would have loved to see more of the in-between between the cinematographer showing up and their decision at the restaurant. I think that I feel like there's maybe I'm projecting, but it feels like there's a missing scene where they do kind of go, okay, this is it. We have to go back. And then they get the added bonus of, which I know it's a cartoon. I love that he noticed the fucking cloud didn't move, because cinematographers are all so focused on the frame. I think that's such a great little bit that he's just standing there. He's like, that thing hasn't moved in 6 hours. I've been standing here for 6 hours and it hasn't moved. I think that's such a great little, you know, character thing. But yeah, no, fuck, I'm in love with this fucking movie.
Did you come up with anything that wasn't like what you saw in the screen, that you thought that was more metaphorical in a sense?
Not even. The only thing for me was, as Simon said, do they get away with the picture, or does it get left there?
Right.
And is it a thing that seeing that OJ's alive, is she realizes, oh fuck, I actually don't care about the money, and it's about family, and it's about me and OJ, you know, dad's gone, it's about the two of us being together. I don't give a shit about the photo can stay there. That was the only thing that I thought in the aftermath of it. I guess, Simon, you probably thought that as well, did you?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I wasn't blown away by the ending. I thought it was...
But I think that's the point, because I mean, what I'm interested in when I'm seeing a Jordan Peele film is intention, because I think we have talked about this before. Like, he's a very intentional filmmaker. So I think we talked about Get Out in the past, where like Get Out was political, right? It was about racism, police brutality, white gaze, unconscious bias, conscious bias, microaggressions, the whole thing. And the ending drove the message about Black empowerment home. And then you have Us, which in my opinion was very psychological. It was about identity, the idea of superego, you know, very Freudian in a way. And with the final twist in the end, the Peele wanted to provoke you. He wanted to shock you, right? And what's different about Nope is that it's entertaining. I mean, that's its purpose. So Nope is delightful. It's just fun. And it's about if you think of the opening title card, it suggested it's about spectacle. I mean, I think that was the overall message, and the lengths we go as a species to create spectacle. And I noted this quote from Peele that kind of sums up his intention with Nope that I really liked. He said, "I wanted to make a spectacle, something that would promote my favorite art form and my favorite way of watching that art form, the theatrical experience. And as I started writing the script, I started to dig into the nature of spectacle, our addiction to the spectacle, and the insidious nature of attention." So the film, which is about getting that money shot, that Oprah shot, right, is all about that relationship to the spectacle and like explored through various different characters like Angel and like M and OJ. So and Jupe, right? I mean, we didn't talk about Jupe a lot. So they all react very differently to the monster, and each one of their approaches, quote unquote, represents a different attitude to spectacle. And with the final scene, my takeaway was that M's attitude is the one that perseveres, like because she's the winner in a way because she gets the money shot. So that said, what I really appreciate about the ending is that it didn't really tell me how to feel, which I feel like sometimes those sort of like sci-fi films can tell you how to feel. They're very prescriptive. So rather than kind of rather than making didactic claims about whether spectacle is good or bad, which I know that some filmmakers, especially when they're in because Peele has only made 3 films, so you know how some filmmakers may want to just push their vision out there as early as possible. I think he allowed me to draw my own conclusions about the characters and therefore the archetype that they may represent, which we just talked about. So yeah, I don't know, the ending did land for me, and I'm trying, like for me, I'm trying to think of the opening scene as the title card. It was about the spectacle, like I think it's a Bible verse that he refers to, not the opening, like official opening scene. That's the kind of closing the loop for me, the spectacle framing. So like on a conceptual, like philosophical level, I really like that. Right, so it sounds like we solved the ending again, thanks to Tim, so. Probably. Tim, thank you so much for your time. You know, I always love chatting with you, and I'm so glad you also got the chance to meet Ben and Simon as well.
I've also like been listening to your guys' podcast every time it drops, and I get so part of it. Like I'll find myself talking, and then one of you will talk because you guys are actually having a conversation, and I'll think, oh God. But yeah, no, I'm thank you guys for coming on, and thank you for having me on. This was really, really fun.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for having us. I think that's the
yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us. Yeah, it's great to hang out.
We'll definitely have to do it again.
And we should do this again for sure.
And do it live. We'll all come to New York.
Do it live.
Oh, I mean, fuck yeah. Absolutely.
It's gonna happen. Like if Tim comes to London, like we're gonna book a venue, we're gonna do like a live podcast thingy, like we'll figure it out. And then I really want to go back to New York. So it is happening. It is happening. Probably not this year, but the ambition is next year. So I'm excited.
All right. So where do they find your podcast?
So our podcast is called That Final Scene, and you can find it on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube as well. If you're the kind of person that listens their podcast on YouTube, I think that's the thing now.
And Amazon Music now as well.
And Amazon Music as well. Yeah, sorry. And you can find me under the same name on Instagram and TikTok. Where can our listeners find you and your podcast and your pages and all the good stuff?
You can find the podcast on my YouTube channel, Comedian in Cinema. The podcast is called How's It Going to End? You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch it on YouTube, Comedian in Cinema on Instagram and TikTok.
Amazing.
Nice.
We will see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Did you like it? Did you like that?
Did I like it? I loved it.
I had no idea you could milk a cat.
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.